The year 2025 will be remembered as a turning point, a year when the lines between peace and conflict blurred across the globe. Wars were no longer contained, isolated events happening far away. Instead, they bled across borders, sent shockwaves through economies, and fundamentally reshaped the alliances that hold our world together. From the frozen trenches of Eastern Europe to the volatile flashpoints of the Middle East and the often overlooked battlegrounds in Africa, the drumbeat of war influenced nearly every major global decision. This is the story of how conflict defined our world in 2025. The grueling war between Russia and Ukraine dragged into another year, becoming a brutal symbol of modern attrition warfare. The front lines barely moved, a stark contrast to the far-reaching consequences that rippled across the planet. Energy markets, still recovering from previous shocks, trembled with every development. Grain supplies, critical for feeding millions, were once again held hostage by the conflict, and the gears of global diplomacy remained frozen in a stalemate. This war taught a hard lesson. Modern conflicts aren't just fought with tanks and drones. They are economic wars, waged with sanctions and trade restrictions. They are information wars, fought with cyber attacks and propaganda, where the truth itself becomes a casualty. The human cost, measured in lives lost and futures destroyed, continued to climb, a grim reminder of the price of unresolved aggression. Every diplomatic failure and battlefield skirmish echoed in households thousands of miles away, proving just how interconnected our world has become. Meanwhile, the Middle East teetered on the brink of a much larger conflagration. The long-simmering Israel-Gaza conflict continued to destabilize the entire region, pulling in new actors and escalating tensions to a fever pitch. A dangerous cycle of missile strikes and heavy-handed military responses became the new normal, with each action fueling the next. Fears of a wider, regional war were no longer theoretical. They were a daily reality. The shadow of Iran loomed large over these events, as its allied groups across the region intensified pressure, turning local disputes into a complex, multi-front chess game. This wasn't just a distant conflict watched on news channels. It had a direct impact on the global economy, sending oil prices soaring and disrupting international diplomatic efforts. The world watched, holding its breath, as the Middle East, a region so critical to global stability, seemed to be marching steadily towards a wider, more devastating war. In 2025, the Red Sea, one of the most vital arteries of global trade, transformed into a dangerous maritime front line. The once dependable shipping lane became a high-risk zone as persistent attacks on commercial vessels sent insurance premiums skyrocketing and forced shipping companies to make impossible choices. This wasn't just a regional headache. It was a direct threat to the global supply chain. Container ships carrying everything from electronics to clothing were rerouted on longer, more expensive journeys around Africa, adding weeks to delivery times and billions to shipping costs. In response, international naval coalitions were deployed, creating a tense military standoff in the narrow waterway. This crisis was a powerful demonstration of how a localized conflict, driven by regional actors, can hold the entire global economy hostage. Suddenly, the price of goods on store shelves in Europe and America was directly linked to the security of a single strait of water, a clear sign of our fragile, interconnected world. While the world's attention was fixed on Europe and the Middle East, devastating wars raged across the African continent, largely hidden from the global spotlight. In countries from the Sahel to the Horn of Africa, long-running civil wars, brutal insurgencies, and ethnic violence spiraled, creating some of the worst humanitarian crises of our time. Millions were forced from their homes, becoming refugees in their own countries, their suffering compounded by drought and famine. But with limited media coverage, the world's response was tragically inadequate. There were no primetime news specials, no emergency sessions at the UN Security Council capturing global headlines. The immense scale of the suffering went largely unnoticed by the international community. This tragic reality highlighted a painful double standard in global affairs. Some wars dominate our screens and our politics, while others, no less horrific, are allowed to fester in the shadows, their victims forgotten. This pervasive sense of global instability triggered a reaction that was both predictable and alarming. By the end of 2025, Global military spending had shattered all previous records, reaching historic, unprecedented highs. Nations around the world, from global superpowers to smaller regional players, embarked on a massive rearmament drive. This wasn't just about fighting the wars of today. It was about preparing for the potential wars of tomorrow. Fear became the primary driver of national policy. The logic was simple. In a world this uncertain, military strength is the only reliable guarantee of security. This arms race created a dangerous paradox. While every nation claimed that peace was its ultimate goal, their actions building larger armies, developing more advanced weapons, and forming aggressive military pacts were making the world a more dangerous and combustible place. The planet was arming for war, even as it longed for peace. Looking back, it's clear that the wars of 2025 did more than just redraw maps and create casualties. They fundamentally reshaped our world. Diplomacy was reconfigured. As old alliances were tested, and new ones were forged out of shared security concerns. Economies were rewired as nations sought to insulate themselves from supply chain disruptions and weaponized trade policies, accelerating the move away from globalization, and our collective sense of security was shattered. The year was a stark and brutal reminder that in our deeply interconnected age, no conflict is truly local. A missile strike in one region can cause economic pain in another. A naval blockade in a distant sea can empty shelves in a supermarket halfway across the world. Teleson of 2025 is that instability. Like a virus, is contagious, and we are all vulnerable to its spread. As 2025 drew to a close, an uneasy quiet settled over many of the world's battlefields. But it was the fragile quiet of exhaustion, not the lasting silence of true peace. The conflicts that had defined the year left deep scars on the global psyche, and a lingering sense of dread about what might come next. The critical question facing us now is not just about predicting where the next war will erupt. It is about whether we have learned anything from the last ones. Have we learned how to de-escalate tensions before they explode? Have we found better ways to resolve disputes than through violence? Or are we doomed to repeat the same tragic mistakes, stumbling from one catastrophe to the next? The future of our world depends on the answer. Thank you for watching. Which conflict do you believe had the biggest global impact in 2025? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this analysis valuable, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the events shaping our world.